I shall come back to you, Flora, very soon now. The secret of invisibility lies there in my books. I shall work in Kent's laboratory till I find the way back. There is a way back, Flora, and then I shall come to you. I shall offer my secret to the world with all its terrible power. The nations of the world will bid for it, thousands, millions. The nation that wins my secret can sweep the world with invisible armies.
A small English town is terrorized by a man that no one can see. This week, we chat about Depression-era incels, a reverse Yoda, and a good version of the NRA. James also puts his love of model trains to good use as we find out if 1933's The Invisible Man stands the test of time.
I do not like model trains.
Do so! Cue the music!
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and joining me, as always, is my buddy, my co-host, my pal, Alan Noah. Step into the studio, Al.
I've been in the studio the whole time because I am the Invisible Man. No, because I'm on my computer in front of my microphone, and you can see me. We have the video thing on. Happy New Year, James. Happy New Year. 2020 is over.
Yep. 2020 is one in the can, and it's a little bit different this year.
I hope so. I hope 2021 is better than 2020. I think that's all anyone is hoping for. We've set the bar so low. Like, as long as this year is a little better, I think everyone will just be super, super happy. So the first movie that we're going to talk about this year is 1933's The Invisible Man. This is the oldest movie we've ever talked about on the podcast. You requested this movie, so I'm just curious, what made you want to go so far back into film history for this week's movie?
Well, I had seen this film before as a kid. This is one of those random VHS films that we owned and, or not owned, recorded off TV. I was raised on a lot of Laurel and Hardy and these kind of things, and I haven't seen this film in decades, but I kind of remembered thinking it was scary when I was a kid. That's really all I remembered from this film, that it was scary, and I remembered a couple of the special effects impressing me as a child. So I kind of really was curious how the film held up. This new streaming app came out, Peacock. It's basically NBC stuff, and it's free. You just have to watch a couple ads. And it was on here, and I'd seen it, and I figured, let's watch it.
Fair enough. So a recap of the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's about a mysterious man who turns up in an inn one night seeking shelter. The man is Dr. Jack Griffin, a scientist who created a serum that can turn him invisible. Unfortunately, a side effect of this potion is insanity. Jack goes on a violent rampage of murder and robbery as the police struggle to capture a man they cannot see. So this is the part of the episode where you talk about how it did at the box office. I mean, were they even counting box office receipts back in 1933? If tickets only cost a penny, what does a box office smash even look like? It made $5?
It made 2 bits. I could tell you this is how well the film did. I mean, Al, did you watch this on Peacock?
Indeed, I did.
So when you typed in The Invisible Man, what came up?
Several options.
Right. There were 6 films that were released between 1933 and 1951 in this franchise. I have to assume it was successful, having had so many, things that come after it. And this film, it is well known. So I don't have box office numbers, but I have to assume it was a big hit.
Fair enough. When the movie starts, you see the very, very old-timey Universal logo with the plane that's clearly on a wire going around a little toy globe. And then right after that, there was a screen that says, NRA, we do our part. And I was like, wait, what the hell is this? This movie was sponsored by the National Rifle Association? But I looked it up, and it actually stands for the National Recovery Administration, which was this thing that President FDR initiated, and it was basically just part of like the New Deal, basically like to help American industries, and it was a good thing to create fair practices, and the film industry supported the NRA, and the NRA supported the film industry, and it doesn't have anything to do with guns whatsoever, but just something I did not know existed until I watched the first 5 seconds of this movie.
That is interesting. And the film opens up in a horrible blizzard, and there's a man wandering in the snow, and the next thing we see, we're at this, it's this pub, this inn, called the Lion's Head Inn. There's a lot of jolly old men in there, and they're drinking and having a good time, and the mysterious man comes in. And this guy, he looks like he's dressed in what appears to be sort of like, at first you might think it's a ski mask with ski goggles on, but it's really more of almost like mummy bandages all around his face.
Exactly. And he wants a room, and everyone in the bar is kind of suspicious because apparently this inn really only offers rooms during the summer months, and it's clearly winter, but he wants a room, and it appears like it's a husband and wife who own the place, and the wife ends up showing the mysterious man to his room, and apparently this woman is like a famous actor. She's a famous comedian. It seemed like she was doing kind of a bit of like this shrill woman, but she brings him into this room. She comes back with some food, and the man says, "I do not want to be disturbed." And then she has to go back because she forgot the mustard. Dun, 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 the mustard. And when she opens the door to give the man the mustard, there's something weird with his mouth. The man very quickly pulls the napkin up, but when he takes the bandage down to eat, you know, he doesn't have a bottom part of his face because we, the audience, know that this mysterious stranger is the Invisible Man.
Right. We gain a little bit of insight because suddenly we're brought to this mansion. We don't know where it is, but inside this mansion, there seems to be a laboratory, and a gentleman's wearing a white lab coat, and he's approached by a young woman who we find out is named Flora, and she's asking about a man named Jack. Where's Jack? What's happened to Jack? It becomes pretty obvious that this mysterious guy is probably named Jack, and this woman is somehow perhaps his girlfriend or his fiance or his wife, but somehow she is asking this man what's happened to this guy.
Right, and it turns out that Jack had been doing secret experiments, like not part of the regular lab work, which was all on the up and up. He had been doing his own weird things off to the side. And we find out later that he had been using this ingredient called monocaine, which comes from a flower in India, and it draws color out of things, but also has this weird side effect of making people go crazy.
Yeah, I kind of like this vague explanation. It gives a little bit of a science explanation. It has a good name, monocaine. That sounds scientific.
Basically, in this movie, it's enough of an explanation. And meanwhile, Jack is back at this hotel. He's doing these experiments in this hotel room, which you got to figure is probably not the ideal place to conduct a scientific experiment. But he seems to have a lot of stuff with him, like a lot of vials and test tubes and doodads for whatever work he's doing. And he keeps saying that there must be a way back. And you can pretty well infer that he's talking about making himself visible again. But the problem is that he's apparently not paying his bills to stay at this hotel, and he is rude to the woman, and so she sends her husband to kick the guy out. The man says, "Listen, you gotta go." The wife says, "You gotta go." And the Invisible Man gets angry, and he pushes the husband down the stairs.
Well, actually, it's interesting because before he gets angry, you see that there is, or at least there used to be, a good and kind of noble man in here, because suddenly he's like, "Oh, sir, I'm so sorry for being angry before. Please, I beg you, I'm imploring you, please." And then when the guy refuses again, because he's like, "Look, the missus says no, I can't say no to her." Then he's like, "Oh, I'm angry," and he gets really mad. But I do like that they had that that small little part where they at least show that there is a little bit of humanity in him.
I guess before like the monocaine kicks in or something.
Or maybe it just hasn't fully taken over yet.
That's fair. But so this old couple, they call the police, and the policeman comes in with like a gang of looky-loos / concerned citizens / just people who want to check out the weird guy upstairs in the inn. And they're like, ooh, we'll come along for the arrest too.
They form a posse, basically. And, I'm certain that one of the drawing effects of this film, when people got out of this theater, was not necessarily the acting or the plot, but the special effects of this film. It's got a lot of things that I don't think a lot of people in 1933 had seen. And now at this scene, when the policeman's up there, we finally get the reveal. We get to see, what does an invisible man look like? Because, of course, he's invisible. So how do you portray an invisible man on screen?
Right. And the modern answer is green screen. I believe in this movie they used black screens and matted the layers of the film, which basically has the same kind of effect. There's a lot of wire work when you don't see the man at all, but you see objects moving across the screen, like he knocks over a table or he opens a door. And these are special effects, I'm making air quotes, in like the loosest definition of the term. And yeah, in 1933, I can totally imagine audiences being like, but by today's standards, it's not particularly impressive.
I disagree. There's a part where he's only wearing his shirt, so there's kind of like a men's white shirt kind of floating around the room. I thought that looked a little bit too transparent. Like, is this almost animated? It's not. It's that double exposure that you're talking about there. But there were parts I still think look fantastic. I think that the famous scene when he is basically unwrapping the bandages around his face, I think that's fantastic. I think it looks really good. And I'll say that every once in a while I catch like an episode of The Honeymooners or I Love Lucy, or I even saw the Ed Sullivan Show. I kind of was curious what that was, but it's amazing how terrible black and white television quality is today. And I thought that the film quality of this film, because this was not television, this was put on 35 millimeter film, I thought it was actually surprisingly good quality of film. And because of that, I thought that some of the special effects, some of them, really held up in a surprisingly decent way.
I guess I see what you're saying. I just found it kind of underwhelming. And to be fair, that's me being a prick, because this movie was made nearly 100 years ago. So yeah, of course technology's evolved. So all right, I'm being snooty about it.
No, you at least acknowledge that audiences in 1933 were wowed.
I assume. I mean, you and I were not alive in 1933. Hey, if we've got any listeners who were alive in 1933 and saw this movie in the theater, I want to know. Please tell me what it was like. Email us, Facebook us, tweet us. If we've got like a 90-year-old listener, I want you to tweet at us, please. That would be so damn cool.
Or just write us a letter.
A handwritten note. We won't get it for a while, but hey, when we do get it, I'll be very, very impressed.
Absolutely. And I want to mention the guy that stars in this film. It's a gentleman named Claude Rains. And there were a lot of big names at the time that were going to be the Invisible Man, but then they all turned it down because pretty much you're not on screen. So, people were kind of pissed off. But I have to say, this guy, Claude Rains, who for the most part, you have no idea what this guy looks like. This guy has a fantastic voice, in my opinion, and I instantly remembered why, and you might understand why, a 5-year-old me thought that this movie was scary. I mean, this guy, I think, has a scary voice. Let me play a little clip of him, and this is a part where he's pretty much explaining the powers of what an invisible man can do.
An invisible man can rule the world. Nobody will see him come, nobody will see him go. He can hear every secret. He can rob and rape and kill.
I just think he has a really creepy voice. I think he was very well cast.
When he mentions I can rob and rape and kill, I feel like the robbing and killing is like a thing that, yeah, you can do that and get away with it and no one will know till later. But raping, yeah, people are going to know about that right away. And the fact that that's one of his go-tos of like, yay, I'm invisible. Now I can rape whoever I want. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm sure 5-year-old you didn't really pick up on that, but I found that very, very disturbing.
Yeah, I didn't even notice it this time. And later on in the film, he does say much more specifically what his plot would be, that I can listen in on world leaders and I can walk into any bank and I can kill anyone with impunity and no one can harm me. And he has all these specific reasons, but what he's going to do. And it's very intelligent of can't go out in foggy days or in snowy nights. But this one, you're right, it's just so random.
Right. Like when he's talking about how he could destroy world powers and things like that, and nations would pay great sums for this power. Like then he sounds like, okay, he's like a Bond villain. But when he says, I can rob and rape and kill, he just sounds like a 1930s incel who's just like, you know, like desperate to get laid. And like, this is why he came up with this potion. But P.S., he's got a beautiful girlfriend in Flora who's madly in love with him. But like, it just gives you like a real window into how sick and twisted this guy is.
His priorities are not in order. Let's just say that.
Fair point. So then he goes over to Kemp, who is the other guy who works in this lab, along with Flora and Flora's father. And Kemp, by the way, seems to have a little bit of a crush on Flora that's like addressed once and then never mentioned again. But Jack is like, hey, guess what, Kemp? You're going to be my partner. We're going to go on a reign of terror. We're going to kill a whole bunch of people, just, you know, randomly for fun. And it'll kind of help me to have someone who's visible. So you're on team homicidal, invisible maniac. Great news for you.
He doesn't just say we're going to kill random people. He says we're going to kill both rich and famous people and nobodies, so that nobody's going to know who's going to be killed. So, you know, he's a pretty egalitarian murderer.
Well, isn't that sweet? He says that like they're going to go back into town because he needs to go back to the hotel to get his notes, which he left there, you know, in the melee when the cops came to arrest him. And then I love what Kemp says. He's like, but we can't go out. It's after 8. Like, that's his reason to not go along with him. It's too late to go for a drive, I guess. Like, maybe people in 1930s England didn't drive after 8 p.m. The movie takes place in England, by the way. We didn't mention.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do like what he says. It's after 8. But they do go out, and back at the inn, there's a mob that he kind of sneaks past. There is this policeman that's now in the inn and is saying, oh, you townsfolk, you're all drunks. There's no invisible man. And he's saying this is all just a big hoax. And as he's saying that, the inkwell lifts up and it's thrown in the policeman's face. And there's all kinds of what you were describing before, a lot of wire work and a lot of things are flying around the room, almost like your haunted mansion kind of thing. And then the police chief, this guy, he's choked to death. The part that I find very interesting is as he's being choked to death, he's still doubting that there is such thing as an invisible man. He's still saying, it's a hoax. And I just thought that was just very poignant, because wouldn't it be insane for people to be saying that something deadly out there that they can't see but they know is out there from all the other reports is killing them, and even as it's killing them they're still saying it's a hoax? That kind of stands up today. Yeah,
that does definitely stand the test of time. Who would have thought we would have gotten a COVID allegory in this 1933 movie?
Well, I mean, it's pretty close to the 1918 pandemic, so, you know.
That's true. That is a good point.
This is a great 1930s montage. There's one of these, all units, there's an invisible man on the loose. It's not even all units, it's actually on the radio. Attention all citizens. Everyone needs to be warned. And it just fades to every single person being terrified, and they're locking up their windows. The police they're going arm to arm and marching across fields, swinging their batons. And I thought that's a really cool montage.
Well, it's interesting watching the Invisible Man like go on his rampage. He kills a bunch of people who are on these like search parties. He like throws them off cliffs. He robs a bank and like starts throwing money out into the street of like, hey, free money. He's just kind of causing chaos for the sake of chaos. Then he derails a train by going into some engineer's office and flipping a switch. And you see this train that's on its tracks going normally like it does. And then after the Invisible Man flips the switch, the train just like turns on its side and goes off of a cliff. Like there's a button in the train office that is like only push if you're a homicidal maniac who wants to kill everyone on this train, because it makes the train topple over.
No, it derailed, Al. As it's turning a corner, he switched the tracks. Have you ever made model trains, Al? You can't switch the tracks while they're on the tracks. You're going to derail the train.
So if you just switch one lever, the whole train's going to flip over?
While it's on the track, you could totally derail a train. You absolutely could. Trains are incredibly dangerous. You can't switch tracks haphazardly. It's incredibly dangerous.
Fine. Okay, you know more about train derailing than I do. All of those years playing on your model train sets, I guess, has really paid off for this one moment. But
always got the ladies. No, it didn't. It never did. I never had a train set.
Sure you do. You're playing with your trains right now. I can hear you tinkering with them. But still, the effect of the train toppling over does look pretty stupid. Again, this is me being a jerk 100 years later. But also, before this happened, Kemp called the cops on Jack, and Jack had a moment with Flora where they were talking, and it seemed like he was maybe okay, but then she had to leave, and then Jack went crazy again, and he vowed that he was going to kill Kemp at 10 p.m. the following night.
Yeah, and, there's only two things I remembered about this whole film from when I was a kid. One is the reveal of when he takes the bandages off his head, and the other is just, I thought it was just very strangely terrifying when he just starts skipping in the snow and he's singing, "Here we go gathering nuts in May, nuts in May, nuts in May." I don't really know why. I think it's just because this guy's voice I find so creepy. And so the police come to Kemp's house, but when they find Flora and her father, they're like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And he's like, Kemp called us. And they're like, "Yeah, right, called you at 2 a.m. and you showed up." So they're interrogating him to find out who exactly Jack is.
Which makes sense. They want to know his motive and everything. But they set up this sting basically with Kemp as bait, and Kemp is clearly not thrilled about being bait. So he asked the policeman to figure out a way for him to escape. So they say that they will very publicly bring Kemp to the police station, but then once they're inside, they'll sneak him off into a back room, put him in a policeman's uniform, and then he can leave and go home and get his car and drive off to safety. But that plan doesn't really work because the Invisible Man is, in fact, invisible. So he sees Kemp change into the policeman's uniform and go home, and he gets into the car with him and says, "Oh, you thought you were clever, Kemp, but I got you, and I'm going to kill you now." And he does this thing where he like ties him up in the back of the car and then sets the car going down the hill over the cliff, and he's explaining everything he's doing, which watching tons of movies over the years has taught me that this plan is not going to be successful, that someone will save Kemp or Kemp will figure out a way out of it. But no, Kemp goes over the hill in the car blows up, and I was like, oh, okay, so that's it for Kemp, huh?
Yeah, this guy, he fulfilled his promise. Promises made, promises kept.
Yeah, he should use that if he ever runs for office, right?
Exactly. So Jack has now killed Kemp, and he's running away, and he finds shelter in a barn. So he's freezing. And I do feel bad for this guy in one regard. You imagine that he left the mansion terrified, and he has no idea what's going on. But this guy has not gotten a good night's sleep in a long time. And so he finally finds this barn in the middle of a snowstorm, and he just collapses asleep under a pile of hay.
Right. And then the old man who lives at the farm hears this snoring and sees the hay rustling, and he knows that it's the Invisible Man. It's the same old man who earlier in the movie, the Invisible Man like steals his hat. So we have seen this guy before. He's encountered the Invisible Man. He knows what a vicious hat stealer he is, I guess. So he goes to the police, and the police very quickly all show up at this barn, and their plan is to light the barn on fire. When the Invisible Man comes out, they'll see his footprints, and they'll shoot him, which is exactly what they do. And I have to say, I thought this was a little anticlimactic, because the Invisible Man is a monster. He's killed a whole ton of people. He flipped over that whole train, and you expect like a big epic takedown of this guy, but it's basically that he was sleeping, they woke him up, and then shot him in the stomach while he was like half asleep.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It is anticlimactic. I mean, you see him walking in the snow. I mean, you see his footprints. It's a cool effect. When he's shot, you do see his body slump in the snow, so that's cool. And then they bring him to the hospital where he's dying, and Flora's able to get there, and she's able to basically, be at his side when he dies. And as he dies, this grand Hollywood ending music comes on. It's basically a reverse of Yoda's death. If you remember, Yoda was sleeping in a bed, and then he disappears, and then there's just an outline where the blanket was. In this case, it starts out with an outline of his body, looks like a floating blanket, and then he slowly reappears. And actually, to its credit, I'm sorry, I forgot. This is the third thing I remember from the film. I did remember that at the very end, he comes back to life. I didn't remember what it looked like or anything, but they actually do it in like 2 steps. It looks like they kind of fade in like a skeleton and kind of some muscles and almost organs, and then go like a classic Hollywood good-looking guy. He comes on and it's like, look at this man. Such a nice-looking gentleman was this horrible monster that we had just looked at. And then the end.
Right. It's a brisk hour and 11 minutes, this movie.
And I love ending credits from old films. We've seen this before in some of the old Disney films. They do most of the important credits in the beginning. So at the end, it's just like, the end. And that's actually why movie previews are actually called trailers. Because it would say, the end, and here's a preview of the new train robbery film. And it would immediately follow this, the end. So I always love when we watch older films, because you don't have to sit through anything. There's no mid-post, end credit scenes. It's just, that's it. NRA, thank you very much. And I'm talking about, FDR's New Deal.
Right, the good NRA.
Or if your initials are NRA, maybe you're good too.
Maybe, sure.
Maybe.
Nathaniel Rudy Allenson.
Allenson? you
I don't know, what's another last name that starts with A?
Jamesinson, something like that.
Oh, yeah, that's way better
than Allenson. Where the hell did you get that name?
I don't know.
So, Al, this is a film that I suggested that you haven't seen before. The streak isn't very good for films that James suggested that Al's never seen before. I believe we're at about, carry the one, get out the graphing calculator. I think we're at maybe 0%.
No, that's not true.
But Al, do you think that 1933's The Invisible Man stands the test of time?
Well, I think in one way you could say it definitely stands the test of time, because they are still making Invisible Man movies, TV shows, remakes, reboots, things like that. There was a 2020 movie, The Invisible Man. It came out right before the pandemic started, starring Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men and The Handmaid's Tale. I'm sure it didn't do gangbusters at the box office because it was right before the pandemic started. But people like seeing these kinds of stories, and it's based on an H.G. Wells novel, and he's had successful adaptations. So in that sense, it stands the test of time. I think that the biggest thing that doesn't stand the test of time is the effects. Like we were saying earlier, I gotta believe that audiences in 1933 were blown away by this technology. They did it with a black velvet screen. Today we would use green screen. I mean, I get that it was a big deal then, but I have a free green screen app on my phone. I could take a picture of you in front of any solid background and then put you in front of any other background. That's really easy to do. And it's just not that impressive. Also, beyond that, the pacing of this movie is very slow. There's like weird conversations that don't need to really take place. Like when the Invisible Man shows up at Kemp's house, they have like a whole conversation about, you can't see me, I will put on bandages. Then the Invisible Man puts on bandages. Then he comes back downstairs and is like, now that I am in bandages, you can see me and it is better for us to talk. Now we are going to go out, so I will take off my bandages again. And like, there's just a lot of like stuff like that of like, yeah, get to it already. It doesn't matter. Just have him show up invisible. He can talk to him invisible. Who cares? We don't need to see the bandages again and taking him on and putting him off. When the Invisible Man is talking to Flora, he's going off about how scary he is. And he says, even the moon's frightened of me, frightened to death. And like, okay, that scared 5-year-old James and maybe it scared audiences in 1933. It just kind of made me roll my eyes. I appreciate this movie's significance in the history of film. If you're a film student, yeah, you should probably watch this. But no, I don't really think it stands the test of time. You know, Universal Pictures tried to do like a reboot of all of their old-timey monsters, and they started with the Tom Cruise Mummy, and then they were going to do like a Frankenstein and Invisible Man and make his whole interconnected universe, and like the plan imploded after the Tom Cruise Mummy bombed. And you know, like I said, there was that Invisible Man movie that came out this year, but it's not interconnected, and I don't know. This movie didn't really do it for me. So I'm going to say it doesn't stand the test of time. What do you think, James?
Well, what I think is that, wow, you appreciate the film. That's about as good as I thought I was going to get. You didn't hate this film, Al?
I wouldn't say that I hated it, but I would say though that even though it's only 70 minutes, I did find myself bored at times, which is not a great sign.
Oh, no. I actually had a blast watching this film. I thought the practical effects were really clever. The wire work was fantastic. You couldn't see the wires. A bike is thrown across the way into the villagers. Totally believable. I just think this guy Claude Rains is fantastic. And I stand by the fact that he's terrifying. And I think the fact that he had to do all of this just with his voice acting is fantastic. I mean, I wonder if it even was Claude Rains, even in those bandages. Probably, but it didn't have to be.
I read something that said that he did use a double frequently, and the double was a lot shorter than him. So like there are parts where you can kind of see like the Invisible Man is shorter than at other times.
That is awesome. You know, it is only 70 minutes, and it shouldn't be a 90-minute film, which by today's standards is very short. It's just as long as it needs to be. Yeah, there's a couple scenes that are superfluous, but I wouldn't say it's slow. I still say I think the film looks great. I'm not sure if it was restored, the version that I saw on Peacock, but if you watch a Lucy episode, it's almost blurry on a modern television, but I was very impressed by this film. Obviously, is this the kind of film that you'd release in 2020? No. But is this the kind of film that a student might release in 2020 and I'd be very impressed by it? Yes. And I'd say, well, you need to work on a couple of these practical effects. But I thought it was a real good time. I thought the acting was good, the plot was fun, and it was creepy, and I thought the plot was interesting enough with a villain that had a believable motivation. That's what a madman would do with an invisible serum. He kind of could take over the world, so I thought it was pretty cool. I've never seen any of the sequels and spin-offs. I assume they're probably less of the same. Maybe by the 50s they got a little bit better in this special effects, but probably by the last ones, they also reduced their budget because they weren't as popular. So, I'm not sure they were any better. So I don't think there's any reason to watch any of the others. But for me, yeah, 1933's The Invisible Man stands the test of time.
You are grading this movie on a serious curve.
I'm seriously grading this film on the fact that I found it entertaining. The special effects, I did find them clever. Obviously, they're not impressive by today's standards. Some of them are. But I'm strictly going by the fact that I was entertained by this. I totally agree with you. The ending kind of sucked. The killing of him. I thought that was totally anticlimactic. There were a lot of other ways they could have killed him or made him jump from a roof or any kind of way that would have been better than just bang, bang, and then just plop on the ground, which they probably only did so that they could do that somewhat impressive effect of the Invisible Man plopping into the snow. But I'm sorry, I was impressed. 70 minutes. If it's on Peacock and you can handle old films, I say check it out. I think you're not gonna have a gangbuster time. You're gonna have a good time.
Random comment about Peacock. Did you have this thing happen when you were watching it where there would be like a scene break and then 5 seconds after the scene changes, they would do ads? Like Peacock put their commercial breaks in the stupidest places. And like, it was close to the right place. Like if they had just moved it like 10 seconds sooner, it would have been a perfect time to do a break.
I'm not sure if my breaks were in the same place, but I actually noticed that, it was every, 20 minutes or something. And sometimes it would be almost mid-sentence. And I did notice, there are a couple parts in this film where it just fades to black and then it fades back to white. It fades in. And I'm like, this is where you put the commercial in, dude. It's so obvious. But I guess is with these old ones, they don't even bother. They don't have someone watch The Son of the Invisible Man from 1942 or something and watch where the perfect part to put a commercial is. They just say if it's 80 minutes long, 4 commercials, one at the beginning, then every 20 minutes.
Yeah, Peacock needs to hire an intern that can figure this shit out.
Or it just seems that it could be a very quick scan by the software itself, and if there are breaks in the film, that's where you put it.
Yeah, that's true. You could probably just have an algorithm do it.
Yeah, do it when it's somewhat silent. I agree with you. That is a fault of Peacock, not The Invisible Man.
That is true. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about a different Invisible Man movie, 2000's Hollow Man. Same kind of basic story, a little bit, maybe? I don't really remember, but made 67 years later. You're not going to want to miss that episode, so remember to subscribe, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Email us at thetestoftimepodcast@gmail.com. Find our old back episodes at testoftimepod.com. Tweet at us, Facebook us, Instagram us. We are at testoftimepod. Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Come on, you know you want to. It'll take 2 minutes. You can do it.
We also love anniversaries, so if it's the 40th anniversary of Flashdance or something and you want us to watch it, we'll watch it. You want us to watch something like Beastmaster, you make Al watch Beastmaster. That's fine by me.
I begged you to watch Flashdance when it was the 40th anniversary. You spit in my face.
I said,
exactly.
Spit in your face, virtually, over Zoom. I pressed that Zoom button that says spit in the recipient's face.
Yeah, I don't know why they made a button for that. Anyway, we'll see you next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.